The night sky over Ouagadougou looked peaceful, but inside Burkina Faso's heavily guarded presidential residence, a storm was brewing. Ibrahim Traoré, young yet hardened by battle, stood by the tall window of his war room, staring at the flickering city lights below. In his left hand, he held a secret intelligence file, clear proof of Israel's hidden operations on Burkinabe soil. Satellite images, intercepted messages, and evidence of bribed local officials. It was all in there. Just minutes earlier, his closest advisors had urged him to take the diplomatic route, send envoys, ask for help from the African Union, and avoid direct conflict with Tel Aviv. But something inside Traoré had finally snapped. Too many of Africa's resources had been stolen, too many shady deals had been made behind the people's backs, and he was done pretending the powerful could be reasoned with. He turned to General Kaboré, his trusted defense chief, and said firmly, "Get ready for the national address. Tonight, the world will hear our truth and our response." Kaboré swallowed hard. He knew what this meant: war or something very close to it. Deep underground, Traoré's media team prepared satellite uplinks, while troops secured the entire compound against possible attacks. Traoré changed into his olive-green military uniform, the same one he wore during his uprising against corruption. As the red recording light switched on, he stared straight into the camera, his eyes burning with the same passion that made him a symbol of hope across West Africa. "Brothers and sisters of Africa," he began, "tonight, I speak not only as the president of Burkina Faso, but as a son of this continent betrayed by those who treat us like pawns. Israel thought it could walk onto our land, buy our people, steal our minerals, and fund militias to destroy us from within." He paused as his powerful words settled in. The generals behind the cameras exchanged uneasy glances. Then, with calm defiance, Traoré declared, "Today, we say enough. Israel crossed the line, and from this moment on, Burkina Faso is ready." His voice was steady but firm. "We do not want war, but if war comes to our doorstep, we will defend ourselves, and we won't stand alone." The message was broadcast on every local TV station and instantly exploded across African social media. In dusty villages and busy city cafes, people watched in stunned silence. Then, lowering his voice, Traoré ended with words that sent chills through the continent. "Africa is not for sale. Africa will not kneel. And tonight, the line has been drawn." The screen went black, but the real storm had only begun. Across West Africa and beyond, embassies scrambled to assess the fallout. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's inner war council rushed into emergency session. Reports confirmed what many feared. Traoré had made the secret evidence public: satellite images, money trails leading to Israeli accounts, and intercepted plans of sabotage near Burkina Faso's northern mines. Israel's intelligence network had been exposed and humiliated overnight. Back in Traoré's war room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Secure radios crackled with chatter. General Kaboré was the first to speak, his voice urgent. "And lo, Mr. President, we must prepare. Retaliation is coming: drone strikes, cyber attacks, maybe even covert assassins. Israel won't stay silent after this." Traoré leaned over a large operations map on the table, marked with red, pins showing the locations of Israeli-linked contractors, fake companies, and hidden weapons depots across West Africa. He pointed to the biggest cluster near the Triber area and said sharply, "These are our first targets. Freeze their accounts. Expose their agents, make them visible so they can't hide. And if any mercenary dares raise a weapon on our land, take them out." Burkina Faso's special forces were already in motion as armored trucks rolled through the streets of the capital, making it clear that any attempt at a sudden coup would be crushed. Traoré understood that betrayal often followed. When foreign money started pouring into the pockets of his rivals, a few trusted young officers worked quickly to prepare messages for the African Union and ECOWAS, urging African nations to stay united and reject any secret deals with Israel. Traoré's strategy was bold. He didn't want this to be just about Burkina Faso. He wanted to turn it into a continental movement, and it worked. Just hours after his speech, protests broke out in Bamako, Niamey, and even parts of Lagos. university students marched with signs that read, "Africa is not for sale, and we stand with Traoré." But not everyone was inspired. Some ministers quietly feared that Traoré was dragging their poor country into a dangerous fight with a global military power. In shadowy corridors, whispers of a soft coup began. Some believed he should be removed for the greater good. But Traoré had stared down bullets before he was ready to face traitors again. Looking General Kabore straight in the eye, he said, "If Israel wants to test our resolve, let them come. But tell the people we do not fight just for Burkina Faso. We fight for every African who's tired of being a pawn in someone else's game." Within 24 hours of his explosive speech, the world turned its eyes toward Ouagadougou. Western media called him reckless. African youth called him brave. In Israel, Netanyahu gave the green light to a covert strike team unit Raven, with orders to shut down Burkina Faso's nerve center before more secrets could leak. But Traoré had already moved first, working with trusted military tech students from the University of Ouagadougou. He shut down every major digital backdoor. His engineers successfully blocked the spyware that Israeli contractors had hidden in Burkina Faso's telecom systems years ago. Standing beside him, General Kabore reviewed the next steps. Traoré studied every field report carefully. Strange convoys moving near the Niger border, unknown drones flying overhead at night, and suspicious foreigners pretending to be aid workers in local bars. His eyes were cold but focused. Instead of responding with bombs, Traoré launched a bold counterattack using the truth. At dawn, his government released a series of leaked documents, exposing how Israeli brokers had bribed corrupt local politicians to gain access to uranium and rare earth mines. They also broadcasted video confessions from captured agents who admitted to sabotage missions across Africa. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #AfricaResists and #TRA or EAcute leaks began trending everywhere. Even leaders who had remained silent were now forced to speak out against foreign interference, fearing their own people might rise up next. But inside Traoré's palace, danger was brewing. Some older generals, secretly promised money and asylum by Israeli envoys, met in secret to plan his removal. One of them, a large man named Brigadier Douamba, quietly tried to turn General Kabore against him. But Kabore, more loyal than ever, immediately informed Traoré. That same night, under the cover of a fake emergency drill, the traitors were arrested without chaos, their passports and hidden bank accounts seized. Outside the capital, the country braced for impact. Special forces increased patrols, and civilian volunteers began organizing local defense teams. On TV and radio, Traoré's voice remained firm and fearless. "We stand as Africans. No more secret deals. No more stolen futures. If they want war, they will face our courage first." As the sun rose over Ouagadougou, the entire city felt like a fortress, ready for whatever came next. Though the country was under siege, it had never felt more united. Civilians brought food and water to the barricades where volunteer patrols stood watch, and young students fired up by Traoré's defiance painted powerful slogans across city walls, like "Africa is ours, not theirs, and no surrender." Inside the presidential bunker, Traoré gathered with his most trusted commanders around glowing maps of suspected Israeli contractor sites under the harsh lights. He turned to Kabore and said firmly, "Tonight, we strike first. We'll hit them so hard they'll think twice before sending another drone." Kabore nodded, tapping on his encrypted tablet. "The teams are ready. 3 targets, their supply depots near the northern border, a hidden communications relay in the forest near Kaya, and a safe house in the capital where they meet with local agents." Then Traoré looked toward the youngest in the room, Adama, a 25-year-old cyber genius. "And your team?" Traoré asked. Adama grinned confidently. "When the power cuts at midnight, they won't see us coming. We'll leak every file, every money trail, every corrupt politician they bought. By morning, their network will be in flames." Meanwhile, far from the command center, Unit Raven, Israel's elite covert team, had already entered the capital. Disguised as foreign journalists, they set up surveillance along Traoré's motorcade routes, searching for a weak spot. But Traoré no longer traveled without decoys. His real motorcade was a fortress of armored vehicles and elite guards. When Unit Raven intercepted what they believed was his SUV, they found only empty cars and a hidden perimeter of snipers waiting in the shadows. Shots rang out. 2 Israeli agents were captured alive. By sunrise, they're forced but undeniable. Confessions were broadcast on national radio. Then Traoré's voice echoed across the airwaves with a powerful message. This is Africa's fight for dignity, and we do not kneel. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu slammed his palm on the table in fury. Every trap he'd set was collapsing, but he wasn't finished yet. He turned to his defense counsel and gave a chilling new order. If Traoré wants a real war, we'll show him the cost of defiance, Netanyahu growled. But back in Ouagadougou, Traoré was already prepared to face that cost no matter how. High as news of Israel's failed ambush spread, the city came alive with chants of unity. People poured into the streets holding hand-painted signs that read, "Traoré fights, we stand." Volunteers built barricades, shared food, and stood shoulder to shoulder in defense of their home. Deep underground, in the flickering glow of a digital map, Traoré leaned in as Kabore gave his report. The captured Israeli agents have confessed. We've located their safe houses and supply lines. Traoré didn't even blink. Good. Tonight, we cut off their head and exposed their claws to the world. Special forces moved fast. In the forests near Kaya, they stormed a hidden relay station, smashed encrypted servers, and seized coded radios. In the capital, cyber teams released undeniable proof of bribed ministers within hours. Resignations swept through the government. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's advisors urged restraint, but he roared with fury. Traoré humiliated us, send the drones, destroy their defenses. But as Israeli drones crossed into Burkina Faso's skies, they were met with surprise. Electronic jammers, one by one. They dropped harmlessly into empty fields, later picked up by villagers laughing as they turned them into trophies. By sunrise, Traoré's voice echoed across radios and phones across the continent. This is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about every African child who deserves freedom from foreign puppets. We stand our ground. In a dark war room, Netanyahu watched in stunned silence, realizing too late that he had underestimated the power of a united people. That same morning, the African Union held an emergency session, half virtual, half gathered in Addis Ababa. Presidents who once kept their distance now leaned in, tense but inspired, and then lived from his war room, not flanked by polished generals, but by farmers, engineers, and local militia leaders. Traoré began to speak. But these weren't trained soldiers behind Traoré. They were ordinary people, ready to defend their land. Brothers and sisters, he began, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. Israel's leaders thought Africa would kneel. They thought our dreams had a price, but they forgot free people don't bargain with chains. Delegates at the African Union murmured as shocking footage played. Downed Israeli drones, villagers cheering beside captured tech and video. Confessions of corrupt ministers breaking down as they named their foreign handlers. Meanwhile, in Israel, Netanyahu struggled to hold his government together. Protests erupted outside his residence, with opposition leaders accusing him of dragging the country into reckless imperial games. And even everyday Israelis began questioning the heavy price, secrets exposed, reputation damaged. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré signed a bold executive order. All mining operations tied to shady foreign deals were now nationalized. Soldiers quickly secured the sites, and workers cheered as foreign security firms were marched out under armed guard. In just 1 week, Traoré had turned a silent war into a public uprising, and Africa, bloodied but alert, started to rally, not just behind one man but behind one idea. Africa must stand alone, or it will never stand at all. As his orders spread, towns across Burkina Faso burst into action. Volunteers lined up at recruitment centers, elders gave blessings to young fighters, and women formed support brigades, cooking for militias, sewing uniforms, and gathering intel that no foreign drone could ever detect. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's inner circle scrambled to contain the fallout. African news channels aired leaked audio recordings of Israeli agents bribing village chiefs to destroy roads and poison water routes. The betrayal stung more than any missile. It cut at the heart of local trust. And as the world watched, global reactions split sharply. Western powers hesitated, caught between loyalty and the truth now laid bare, while countries allied with Israel issued bland, diplomatic statements urging dialogue and restraint. The streets of Africa told a different story. From Dar es Salaam to Nairobi, massive crowds gathered, holding handmade signs that read, "We stand with Traoré and Africa is not your colony." Deep inside his bunker, Traoré met with regional commanders around a dusty map of West Africa, marked with stones showing troop positions. He leaned over it, speaking in a low but powerful voice, "We don't fight for gold. We don't fight for revenge. We fight so our children know we refuse to crawl." A heavy silence filled the room. Even battle-hardened soldiers felt the depth of those words. This war was no longer just about Traoré. It was Africa's message to the world. Never again would it bow to backroom deals made in foreign capitals. Outside, under the night sky, small campfires lit up the hills, thousands of flames, burning with more meaning than any foreign contract ever could. At sunrise, the first convoy of Burkina Faso's new defense alliance rolled toward the northern mining corridor. Old trucks, armored with scrap metal, carried young recruits singing liberation songs louder than the engines themselves. Alongside them marched veterans. Many had once fought rebels funded by the same global networks that Traoré now accused Israel of using. Satellite images revealed a new kind of resistance, villagers blocking roads with logs not to stop the army, but to keep enemy mercenaries out. Local hunters, armed with rifles and deep knowledge of the land, set up night patrols. They knew every ravine, every hidden trail satellites could never see. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu faced a divided cabinet. Some demanded a swift military escalation. Others warned of the global backlash. Images of African mothers with babies on their backs waving flags and promising to resist would damage Israel in the court of world opinion. International journalists began pouring into Ouagadougou. But Traoré didn't hide in bunkers. He stepped before the cameras every day, fearless, calm, and determined. Our silence was seen as weakness, Traoré declared in a live broadcast that echoed across the African continent. But our silence was patience, and that patience is gone. Across Burkina Faso, hidden radio operators passed encrypted messages between resistance cells. Farmers shared food with soldiers. Teachers showed children how to duck and hide when drones flew overhead. And the entire nation moved not by order, but by pure belief. In those tense hours before the first real clashes, one thing became clear. To Netanyahu's advisors and the watching world, Traoré had turned his entire country into armor. The first skirmish broke out just before midnight near the contested phosphate fields. Israeli-trained mercenaries disguised without official uniforms tried to sabotage Burkina Faso's newly installed radar systems, but they misjudged the local militias, who had been quietly preparing for weeks under moonlight. Gunfire echoed through the dry savannah. By dawn, the news reached Ouagadougou. To brave soldiers lost, but the radar station held strong. Traoré called an emergency war council. Around an old wooden table, maps were unrolled, and coffee cups rattled each time a fist slammed down. Traoré's voice sliced through the tension. They have money and machines, but we have land, we have people, and we have purpose. We bleed here. They bleed in the headlines. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's team wrestled with their next move. Could they launch a deeper strike into Burkina Faso without sparking backlash from Western allies? Every option came with a political cost. Leaks from the Israeli cabinet made global headlines. Israel considers direct action in West Africa. But while diplomats hesitated, Burkina Faso surged with purpose. Fear had vanished. University students organized blood drives, village elders led unity prayers beneath baobab trees, and mothers memorized the location of nearby shelters. Farmers dug secret pits to hide food and water for soldiers. And when Traoré spoke again on national radio, the nation listened as one. His voice was calm, yet unshakably firm. If they want war, they will find it here and lose it here. Africa is awake. Across the continent, people gathered around TVs and radios. And for the first time in generations, Africa didn't feel small or silent, it felt powerful and prepared. By the final week of the standoff, the world's attention had zeroed in on a strip of red earth between the Sahel and the Sahara. Leaked satellite images revealed rows of armored vehicles, drones circling invisible borders, and a silence so tense it pulsed, broken only by the distant hum of news helicopters. Inside the presidential bunker, Traoré paused alone before walking into the war room, where flickering maps displayed enemy movements and live updates from field commanders. He slowly traced a red line on the screen, the route Israeli mercenaries would likely use if they advanced. Suddenly, an aide rushed in, breathless. "Mr. President, the world media is asking, will you negotiate?" Traoré adjusted his green fatigues and replied without hesitation, "Tell them, Africa doesn't negotiate its dignity." Moments later, he appeared live on every major news network. Millions watched as he leaned toward the mic and said, "We did not seek this war, but if you come for our children's future, we will bury your ambitions beneath African soil." In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's government was crumbling under the weight of leaked documents, protests, and international outrage. Allies began pulling support, arms dealers paused shipments, and inside his cabinet, unity dissolved into blame. Then, at dawn on the 10th day, Israeli forces silently withdrew from the border under drone watch. Without a single shot fired, they left behind scorched tire tracks and a continent more united than ever. For the first time in living memory, church bells and mosque calls rang together across Ouagadougou. Market women danced in the streets, and young soldiers wept in the arms of their parents. In that fragile dawn, Traoré understood this was more than just a military victory. It was proof that Africa's struggles would no longer be hidden in silence. As he stepped onto the palace balcony, facing a sea of cheering citizens, he thought of every mother, every orphan, every farmer who held onto a dream greater than fear. "Africa is not your playground," he whispered into the wind, "and we will never bow again." What the world had just witnessed wasn't just a battle between governments. It was the awakening of a continent's spirit. When foreign power tried to crush the backbone of a rising African nation, Traoré didn't fold. He stood against drones, pressure, and politics, and proved that when courage is fueled by the will of the people, it cannot be bought or broken. This story is a reminder. True leaders don't rise for themselves, they rise for the generations to come. For the farmer sowing the land, for the mother feeding her child, for the youth daring to dream beyond the scars of colonization. Traoré's stand was not just for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa. You can question our governments, you can covet our resources, but you will never again silence our spirit. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay awake, stay strong, and remember, history belongs to those who refuse to bow.